She was sitting at her kitchen table, staring at a pile of overdue bills. Her hands were trembling. Her throat was tight. She had tried everything: budgeting spreadsheets, extra shifts, late nights, prayers she wasn't sure anyone heard. And still, nothing seemed to change. She felt like abundance was something that happened to other people. People who were luckier, more talented, more deserving. Not her. Then, almost by accident, she came across a recording of Louise Hay, a soft voice cutting through the noise of her exhaustion. The voice said something so simple it almost made her laugh. 3 words. Just 3. And a suggestion: repeat them for 2 minutes a day. She was skeptical. She was the kind of woman who believed in hard work, not affirmations. But she was also desperate. So that night, she sat on the edge of her bed, closed her eyes, and whispered those 3 words. Then she said them again. And again. At first it felt foolish. But somewhere around the 40th repetition, something shifted inside her chest. Not a miracle, not a thunderclap, but something quieter and more powerful. Like a door, long sealed, beginning to loosen. Within 3 weeks, she received an unexpected freelance offer. Within 2 months, a debt she'd forgotten about was forgiven. Within a year, her entire financial reality had reorganized itself around a new inner truth she had planted with just 3 words. That woman is real. And so is the science and spiritual wisdom behind what she experienced. Louise Hay spent decades teaching that the words we speak, especially the ones we direct at ourselves, are not just sounds. They are instructions we give the universe. Today, you are going to learn those 3 words. And you are going to understand exactly why they work. Welcome to the Louise Hay Manifest channel, a space dedicated to the life-changing wisdom of one of the most influential teachers of the human potential movement. If this is your first time here, you are in the right place at exactly the right moment. And if you have been with us for a while, you already know, the teachings of Louise Hay are not passive philosophy. They are active tools that transform lives. Today's video centers on one of the most deceptively simple and profoundly powerful practices Louise Hay ever taught: the use of a 3-word phrase repeated with intention. 3 words that, when spoken with sincerity and repetition, begin to dismantle the invisible walls we have built between ourselves and the abundance that is our birthright. Louise Hay believed, and modern neuroscience is increasingly confirming, that the subconscious mind does not distinguish between what is real and what is vividly imagined or repeatedly affirmed. When you say something to yourself often enough, your brain begins to wire itself around that truth. Neural pathways deepen. Beliefs shift. And as beliefs shift, behavior changes. And as behavior changes, so does the reality that behavior creates. But here is what Louise knew that most self-help teachers miss: it is not just about thinking positively. It is about releasing the old programming first. It is about understanding why you have been blocking abundance, not because you are broken, not because you are unworthy, but because of old stories you inherited and accepted as facts. The 3 words we are going to explore, "I am enough," are not just a feel-good phrase. They are a declaration of spiritual and psychological truth. They directly confront the core wound that Louise Hay identified as the root of almost all suffering: the belief in one's own unworthiness. In this video, we will walk through 7 chapters that explore the origin of this belief, the neuroscience of affirmation, the spiritual mechanics of abundance, and the practical daily practice that Louise Hay prescribed. By the end, you will not just know the 3 words, you will understand why they are true, and you will feel them beginning to resonate somewhere deep inside you. Take a breath. Open your heart. And let us begin. Before you can receive abundance, you must understand what is standing in the way, and Louise Hay was extraordinarily clear about this. The primary block to abundance is not circumstance. It is not bad luck. It is not the economy, your upbringing, or your education. It is a deeply embedded belief in personal unworthiness. This belief does not announce itself loudly. It does not walk into the room and say, "Hello, I am the reason your bank account is empty." Instead, it whispers in the background, in the way you hesitate to ask for a raise, in the way you shrink in negotiations, in the way you feel vaguely guilty when good things happen to you. Louise Hay traced most of these beliefs back to childhood. The mind of a young child is like wet cement. Everything that is said, by parents, teachers, religious figures, siblings, gets pressed into that soft foundation and hardens over time. A child told they are too much or never enough will carry that message into adulthood like a stone in their pocket. The tragedy, Hay taught, is that none of these messages were originally true. They were projections. They were the fears and limitations of other wounded people. But because a child has no defense against the authority of the adults around them, those messages became embedded as core beliefs. Core beliefs are powerful because they operate below conscious awareness. You do not decide to believe you are unworthy. You simply act from that belief, turning down opportunities, self-sabotaging relationships, spending money impulsively, or refusing to invest in yourself. Abundance, in Louise Hay's framework, is not just financial. It is the full spectrum of life's richness: love, health, joy, creativity, meaningful work, deep relationships, inner peace. When unworthiness is the operating system, all of these streams become restricted, not because the universe is withholding, but because the self is not yet open to receiving. Here is the crucial distinction Hay made: the universe is always saying yes. It is always responding to what we believe to be true about ourselves. If you believe, at the core level, that you do not deserve abundance, the universe, through the mechanism of your subconscious choices and perceptions, will confirm that belief. This is why willpower alone does not work. You can set 100 goals, make 100 vision boards, and hustle relentlessly, but if the hidden programming says you are not worthy, it will undermine every effort. The work must happen at the level of belief. This is also why affirmations, done correctly, done consistently, done with emotional resonance, are so transformative. They are not wishful thinking. They are reprogramming. They are replacing old cement with new foundations. The 3 words, "I am enough," strike directly at the root of the unworthiness wound. They are not a claim about achievement or performance. They are a declaration about inherent worth, the kind that exists before accomplishment, before approval, before anything you have ever done or failed to do. Louise Hay's journey was not theoretical. She arrived at her teachings through personal crucible. Diagnosed with cervical cancer in the 1970s, she faced a medical reality that most people would meet with terror and resignation. Instead, she asked a radical question: what is the emotional root of this illness? Drawing on her work in metaphysical healing, Hay connected cancer, particularly in the reproductive area, to deep, unresolved resentment and patterns of self-blame rooted in childhood sexual abuse she had suffered. She made a decision that shocked even those close to her. She would heal herself through forgiveness and affirmation before agreeing to conventional treatment. Within 6 months, her cancer was gone. Whether one views this as miracle, mind-body medicine, or coincidence, it permanently altered Louise Hay's relationship to the spoken word. She became convinced, from lived experience, that words and beliefs are not decorative, they are causative. She went on to compile what became You Can Heal Your Life, a book that has sold over 50 million copies worldwide. In it, she mapped specific negative beliefs to specific physical conditions, and she provided affirmations, positive, present-tense statements, as the antidote. The word affirmation itself she treated with reverence, because it comes from the Latin affirma, to make firm, to strengthen. What Hay understood intuitively, science is now beginning to confirm. The field of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to new experiences and thoughts, shows that repeated mental patterns actually change the physical structure of the brain. New neural connections form. Old ones weaken. What you think repeatedly becomes, literally, the shape of your mind. That I am the realm of abundance. Hay taught that every thought about money, about deserving, about success is a word planted in the garden of the subconscious. If the seeds are weeds, I'll never have enough, money is the root of all evil, rich people are greedy, the garden will grow accordingly, regardless of how hard you work at the surface level. She was also meticulous about self-love as the prerequisite for abundance. Not arrogance. Not vanity. But the quiet, radical act of treating yourself as worthy of kindness. She noticed that people who struggled most with money often struggled most with treating themselves with basic gentleness. The phrase, "I am enough," was, for Hay, the master key, because it addressed the self at the level of being, not doing. It was not, "I do enough" or "I earn enough." It was a statement about existence itself. You are enough simply because you exist. This single shift, when truly internalized, changes every downstream behavior. You stop undercharging. You stop overworking out of fear. You stop apologizing for your needs. You begin, naturally and organically, to make choices that reflect the value you know yourself to have. Louise Hay called this, loving the self into abundance, not striving your way there, but opening yourself there, one word at a time. When you repeat a phrase like, "I am enough," something measurable begins to happen inside your skull. Neuroscientists have spent decades studying the effects of repeated self-referential statements on brain function, and the results are quietly extraordinary. The brain processes words spoken aloud differently from words merely thought. When you vocalize a phrase, you activate not just language centers but also auditory cortex, motor cortex, and, critically, the default mode network, the part of the brain most associated with self-referential thought and identity. This means that speaking, "I am enough," out loud is not just communication, it is an identity statement the brain takes seriously. The more often the statement is made, the more the brain begins to treat it as a stable piece of self-knowledge, rather than an aspiration or a performance. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is deeply involved in feelings of unworthiness. When you believe you are not enough, the amygdala fires consistently, reading the social world as a source of judgment and threat. This creates a chronic low-grade stress response that constricts creative thinking, relationship warmth, and even financial decision-making. Repetitive affirmations, particularly those spoken with slow, deliberate breath, activate the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, and begin to calm the amygdala's alarm signals. Over time, the nervous system learns that safety and worthiness coexist, and this changes everything. There is also the phenomenon of self-affirmation theory, developed by psychologist Claude Steele. His research demonstrated that when people affirm their core values, they become measurably more open to new information, more resilient under stress, and more capable of adaptive problem solving, all of which are essential to creating abundance in practical terms. 2 minutes is not an arbitrary time frame. Research on mindfulness and neural entrainment suggests that sustained, focused repetition of a single phrase for approximately 2 minutes is sufficient to begin shifting the brain's default interpretive framework. It is long enough to move past the initial resistance, the inner voice that says, "This is silly," and into genuine neural engagement. The morning is particularly potent. In the first 30 minutes after waking, the brain is in a theta-dominant state, slow, receptive, highly suggestible. This is the state children are in for much of their early childhood, which is exactly why childhood messages are so deeply imprinted. Morning affirmation practice uses this same window to install new programming. Emotion amplifies the effect. A phrase spoken flatly has less neural impact than one spoken with genuine feeling, even manufactured feeling. This is why Hay always encouraged people to feel the affirmation, not just recite it. The limbic system responds to emotional content and releases neurochemicals that strengthen memory encoding. When you say, "I am enough," with breath, with presence, with even the smallest flicker of willingness to believe it, you are not just reciting words. You are performing a precise neurological intervention on the mind that has been telling you otherwise. Louise Hay drew freely from multiple spiritual traditions, but her framework was always grounded in a single premise: the universe is fundamentally abundant, and that abundance is our natural inheritance. Scarcity, she taught, is always a human invention, a story we tell, not a fact about reality that I and the metaphysical tradition she worked within, the visible world of finances, relationships, and health is seen as a reflection of the invisible world of belief and consciousness. This is not magical thinking, it is an ancient understanding found in Hermeticism, in Vedic philosophy, in the Sermon on the Mount, and in modern quantum physics exploration of the observer effect, the concept of, as within, so without, one of the oldest spiritual laws, suggests that the inner state creates the outer condition, not the reverse. Most people wait for outer conditions to change before allowing their inner state to improve. Louise Hay inverted this entirely: change the inner state first, and the outer conditions must follow. I am enough is a spiritually precise statement because it aligns the individual self with a universal truth. In virtually every wisdom tradition, the human soul is considered inherently worthy, not because of what it produces, but because of what it is. To say, I am enough, is to agree with the universe's assessment of you. Hay often spoke about the concept of a universal supply, an infinite stream of good that flows freely to those who are open to receiving it. She used the metaphor of a hose. The supply is always flowing, but if the hose is kinked by fear, unworthiness, or resentment, the water cannot reach you. Affirmation is the act of straightening the hose. Gratitude was Louise Hay's preferred companion to affirmation. She taught that when you are genuinely grateful, not performatively, but deeply, you are in a frequency of abundance already. Gratitude says, good things exist in my life. And from that acknowledgement, more goodness tends to flow. Forgiveness was the other indispensable element. Hay was insistent on this. You cannot receive new abundance while carrying the weight of old resentment. Resentment, she said, is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. It keeps you tethered to the past and unavailable to the present, which is where all manifestation actually happens. The phrase, I am enough, also carries spiritual weight in the context of worthiness to receive. Many deeply religious or spiritual people have been inadvertently trained to believe that wanting things for themselves is selfish, that suffering is noble and abundance is suspect. Hay challenged this directly. A person who loves themselves fully is better equipped to love others and to be of service in the world. Abundance, in the spiritual sense, is not hoarding. It is flow. It is the experience of enough, enough for you, enough to share, enough to grow, enough to give. And that experience begins with the inner declaration that you, yourself, are already enough to begin. When you repeat, I am enough, with spiritual intention, you are not demanding the universe deliver to you. You are simply removing the barrier that has been telling the universe to wait. Louise Hay was a practical woman. She did not simply offer philosophy, she offered method. And the method she returned to, again and again, across decades of teaching, was the mirror work affirmation practice. Simple, daily, uncomfortable at first, and deeply effective, the practice is this: stand or sit before a mirror. Look directly into your own eyes, not at your face, not at your hair or your skin, but into your eyes, which Hay called the windows of the soul. And then speak the words, I am enough. Slowly. With breath. With eye contact. Do this for 2 minutes. Set a timer if you need to. Repeat the phrase continuously, in different rhythms, with different emphasis. I am enough. I am enough. I am enough. Let the repetition move through resistance. Let it become almost meditative. The first time most people try this, they feel foolish. Some feel sad. Some feel angry. Hay considered all of these responses signs that the practice is working, that the phrase is making contact with old wounds that need to be met and released. She called discomfort during mirror work the healing edge. Consistency matters far more than intensity. 2 minutes every day for 30 days produces more lasting change than an emotional breakthrough once a month. The nervous system learns through repetition, not through occasional peak experiences. Make the practice boring. Make it routine. That is when it becomes powerful. Morning is optimal, but any time is better than no time. Some practitioners find the last 2 minutes before sleep equally powerful, planting the affirmation directly into the unconscious mind as it prepares to consolidate the day's learning during sleep. You can also carry the phrase with you throughout the day as a quiet, internal mantra. When you feel the contraction of unworthiness, in a meeting, in a financial decision, in a relationship moment, you can breathe and silently return to "I am enough." Over time, it becomes an automatic response to fear rather than a deliberate practice. Louise Hay also recommended writing the affirmation. There is something about the hand moving across the page that engages a different dimension of memory and commitment. Write "I am enough" 20 times in the morning, and notice what objections arise, because those objections are the subconscious programming surfacing for examination. Write those objections down too, and then write the affirmation again in response. The practice can and should expand over time. I am enough is the foundation, but you can build upon it. I am enough, and I deserve abundance. I am enough, and money flows to me with ease. I am enough, and my needs are always met. Let the affirmation become a living, growing statement of your deepening belief. What Louise Hay promised, and what thousands of her students confirmed, is that the practice works not because of magic, but because of truth. The affirmation is not creating something false. It is dissolving what is false, and revealing what was already, real. Hay House, the publishing company Louise Hay founded, has collected thousands of testimonials from people whose lives shifted through the regular practice of affirmation. While no two stories are identical, a remarkable pattern emerges across all of them. The outer change always followed an inner one. That a woman from London, a school teacher earning a modest salary, began the "I am enough" practice after attending a Louise Hay workshop. Within 4 months, she had negotiated a salary increase she had been afraid to ask for in 6 years. She credited not the negotiation itself, but the shift in how she felt walking into the conversation. That a man in his 50s, recovering from bankruptcy after a failed business, spent 3 months doing mirror work. He described the early sessions as excruciating. He could barely hold his own gaze. But he persisted. By month 3, he had been approached with a business partnership he would previously have dismissed as too good to be true. He accepted it. The business succeeded. A young mother battling postpartum depression and financial strain began repeating "I am enough" each morning while her baby slept. She noted that the first change she noticed was not financial at all, it was emotional. She stopped apologizing constantly. She started asking for help. Those behavioral shifts reorganized her support network and, eventually, her income. Louise Hay herself was perhaps the most powerful testimony. She arrived at her teachings having survived abuse, abandonment, and a cancer diagnosis. She died in 2017 at the age of 90, having built an international publishing empire, authored dozens of books, and touched more than 50 million lives. She did not accomplish this through extraordinary luck or privilege. She accomplished it through sustained, deliberate inner work. These stories share a common structure. The affirmation practice first changes how a person feels about themselves. That feeling then changes how they present themselves to the world. And the world, encountering a person who genuinely believes in their own worth, responds differently, with more opportunity, more generosity, more recognition. That it is worth noting that the practice does not promise effortlessness. Louise Hay was not teaching passivity. She was teaching the importance of clearing inner obstacles so that effort could actually land, could actually produce results, rather than being endlessly undermined by self-doubt and fear. Many people report that the most surprising thing about the practice is what they stop doing. They stop tolerating situations that diminish them. They stop working for rates that insult their value. They stop relationships that ask them to be less than they are. The abundance that follows is often as much about subtraction as addition. The common thread in all these stories is the willingness to begin, even in disbelief. Hay never asked people to fully believe the affirmation on day 1. She only asked them to be willing to try, willing to repeat, willing to stay with the discomfort long enough for something to shift. That willingness, she said, is itself a form of faith. And faith, even the size of a mustard seed, is enough to move mountains. The final chapter of this teaching is not an ending, it is a beginning. Because the real work of I Am Enough is not a 2-minute practice. It is a new relationship with yourself that you choose to cultivate every day, in every interaction, in every choice you make about how to spend your time, your energy, and your resources. Louise Hay taught that abundance is not a destination. It is a way of moving through life. A person in a state of genuine enoughness is not anxious about the future, not resentful of the present, not ashamed of the past. They are simply here, open, available, and trusting. To build a life of effortless abundance, you must become someone who regularly examines their beliefs, not from a place of self-criticism, but from curiosity and compassion. When something feels blocked or limited, ask yourself, what do I believe that would produce this result? And then ask, is that belief actually true? Most of the beliefs that limit us are not true. They are inherited. They are old. They belong to someone else's fear that we accepted as our own. When you identify them clearly, you have the power to choose differently. That choice, made repeatedly, is what affirmation actually is. Abundance practices that support the I Am Enough foundation include tracking what you are grateful for each day, giving generously even in small amounts to keep the channel of giving and receiving open, celebrating every financial win no matter how modest, and refusing to speak negatively about money in casual conversation. Hay was specific about the language of money. I can't afford it was a phrase she discouraged. She preferred, I choose not to prioritize that right now, because the first closes a door and reinforces scarcity, while the second affirms agency and abundance. Language is not just a mirror of belief, it is a sculptor of it. Community matters. Louise Hay ran groups, workshops, and healing circles because she understood that affirmation practiced in the presence of others carries exponential power. Finding even one person with whom you share this practice, a partner, a friend, a group, accelerates the transformation considerably. Self-care is abundance practice. Every time you choose to rest when you are tired, to eat nourishing food, to say no to something that depletes you, you are affirming your own worth at a behavioral level. The body receives the message before the mind does. Finally, be patient with the process, and fierce in your commitment to it. Louise Hay spent years doing this work before her life reorganized around it. The affirmation is a seed, not a vending machine. Plant it every day. Water it with attention and feeling. Trust the season, the universe has been waiting for you to agree with its original assessment of you, that you are worthy, that you are loved, and that, in every sense of the word, you are enough. We began this video with a woman at a kitchen table, trembling over bills she didn't know how to pay. And we end with this truth, she is not a distant story. She is every person who has ever felt that abundance was meant for someone else. She is you, perhaps, on a day that felt heavy and small. And what changed for her can change for you, not through luck, not through straining harder, but through the simple, radical, daily act of telling yourself the truth. Louise Hay dedicated her entire life to a single teaching, dressed in many forms. You are worthy of love, of abundance, of joy, of health, not because of what you accomplish, but because of what you are. The 3 words, I am enough, are not a consolation prize for people who have given up on achieving. They are the very foundation from which true, lasting, effortless achievement becomes possible. They are the ground under your feet before you take the first step. Begin tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight, before you sleep, stand before a mirror if you can. Or simply close your eyes where you sit. Breathe. And say the words. I am enough. Say them again. And again. For 2 minutes, let those words be the only truth in the room. Let the universe hear you agree with it. And then, watch what becomes possible. If this video touched something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel for more teachings rooted in the wisdom of Louise Hay. And leave a comment below. Tell us the moment you decided you were enough, or the moment you are beginning to believe it. We read everyone. Because your story matters. Because you matter. And because you are, always, and in every way, enough.